In a quiet suburban town, a young girl's disappearance left an entire community searching for answers. But what the town didn't know was that it would take 48 years for the truth to finally surface. The person responsible? Someone they trusted, someone they never suspected. On June 13, 1967, in the state of Pennsylvania, a little girl named Gretchen Harrington was born. She was the youngest of 3 daughters, and from the very beginning, she was surrounded by the warmth of family and the values of faith. Soon after her birth, the Harrington family moved to a small, close-knit town known for its quiet streets and strong sense of community. Gretchen's father had accepted a position as a pastor in the local church, and with that role came not only responsibility, but also deep respect from the townspeople. For Gretchen, childhood in this new town was joyful. She quickly grew to love the place she now called home. The air was filled with the sound of children's laughter, and the streets were safe enough that parents allowed their kids to play outside until the sun went down. With wide stretches of green nature, wooded areas, and riversides, the town felt almost like a paradise for children. For Gretchen and her sisters, life here was simple, innocent, and full of promise. Growing up in a religious household, Gretchen spent much of her time at her father's church. She attended Sunday school faithfully and quickly became known for her diligence and intelligence. Teachers and peers admired her for her ability to excel in her studies, always earning top marks in her Sunday school lessons. Those who knew her described her as kind, obedient, and full of light, a young girl with a bright future ahead. By the summer of 1975, Gretchen was just 8 years old, full of energy and excitement for life. But that summer would mark the beginning of a nightmare, one that would haunt her family, her town, and eventually the world for nearly half a century. It was the morning of August 15, 1975, a day that began like any other summer day in Marple Township, Pennsylvania. The Harrington household was alive with the usual rhythm of activity. Gretchen, now 8 years old, had woken up early, full of energy, and dressed herself in her favorite outfit, a simple white blouse paired with denim shorts and sneakers. She was excited, because that morning, just like many before it, she was heading to Vacation Bible School. Vacation Bible School was a highlight for children in the area. It was a place not just for learning scripture, but also for games, songs, and friendships. Parents felt comfort in sending their children there, knowing it was safe, structured, and guided by faith leaders of their own community. That morning, Gretchen prepared to make the short walk from her home to the Trinity Church, where her father served as pastor. From there, she would usually head to Reformed Presbyterian Church, where classes were held. The walk was familiar, and Gretchen had done it before without issue. This was the kind of town where neighbors looked out for one another, where children could be trusted to make small journeys on foot without fear. But on this particular morning, something went terribly, unimaginably wrong. Gretchen never arrived at her class. At first, there was little alarm. Parents and teachers assumed perhaps she had been delayed or distracted. But as time passed and Gretchen still did not appear, unease grew. Calls were made, questions were asked. Had anyone seen her along the way? Had she stopped at a friend's house? By noon, the unsettling truth could no longer be ignored. Gretchen had vanished. Her father, Pastor Harold Harrington, was deeply shaken. The very church that symbolized safety and moral guidance was now at the center of a mystery that terrified the community. Police were notified immediately, and what began as a missing child report would soon evolve into a desperate search effort that drew in neighbors, friends, and authorities alike. For the Harrington family, panic set in quickly. Gretchen was not the kind of child to wander off without telling anyone. She was responsible, respectful, and close to her family. To them, it was unthinkable that she would simply disappear. And so, the search for answers began. The moment it became clear that Gretchen was missing, the community of Marple Township was thrown into turmoil. What began as quiet concerns soon turned into frantic mobilization. Neighbors stepped out of their homes, church members gathered in groups, and local authorities sprang into action. By afternoon, volunteers were canvassing the streets. Parents called out Gretchen's name, their voices trembling as they searched yards, parks, and alleyways. The wooded areas near the churches were combed carefully, every bush and path checked in hopes of finding the young girl. The police coordinated with citizens, turning what had once been an ordinary summer day into a scene of urgent desperation. Officers from the Marple Township Police Department immediately opened a missing child investigation. They interviewed anyone who might have seen Gretchen that morning. Witnesses recalled watching her begin her familiar walk, but no one could say exactly where she disappeared. It was as though she had simply vanished into thin air. For her parents, Pastor Harold and Mrs. Harrington, the hours stretched into agonizing uncertainty. Gretchen was not just another child in the community. She was the daughter of a man many saw as a spiritual leader. The idea that something so tragic could touch their family seemed impossible, almost unthinkable, and yet it was happening before their very eyes. Day turned into night, and the search intensified. Flashlights flickered through the darkness as teams scoured fields, ditches, and wooded trails. Flyers with Gretchen's picture were quickly printed and distributed. The image of the bright-eyed 8-year-old in her summer clothes was soon seen on telephone poles, shop windows, and community boards. The entire township was gripped by fear. Parents who once felt comfortable letting their children walk freely now clutched their hands tightly. Conversations whispered in kitchens and on porches all circled back to the same chilling question: where is Gretchen Harrington? Despite the urgency and the countless volunteers, the first night of searching ended with no trace of her. And as dawn broke the following day, hope began to waver. People prayed, cried, and pleaded for her safe return. But deep down, many feared the worst. For days, the people of Marple Township clung to hope, refusing to believe that little Gretchen might be gone forever. Families continued searching fields and wooded paths. Churches kept their doors open for prayer, and police followed every possible lead. But on August 22, 1975, a man walking his dog through a wooded area in Ridley Creek State Park, about 6 miles from her home, stumbled upon a sight that would haunt the community forever. Hidden among the trees lay the lifeless body of 8-year-old Gretchen Harrington. The discovery sent shockwaves through Delaware County. News spread quickly, and soon the quiet suburban town was gripped by sorrow. For Gretchen's parents, Pastor Harold and his wife, the confirmation was shattering. The little girl they had prayed for, the child so full of innocence and light, had been taken from them in the cruelest way imaginable. Authorities immediately secured the scene. The wooded area was combed for evidence, every leaf and path examined for clues that might reveal who had committed such an unspeakable act. Detectives were careful and methodical, knowing that the answers to Gretchen's disappearance lay hidden in those trees. The Delaware County Medical Examiner's Office later revealed what investigators had feared. Gretchen had died as the result of blunt force trauma to the head. The medical examination revealed that Gretchen had been assaulted before she was killed. This devastating detail confirmed to investigators that they were not only looking for a murderer, but also a predator who had targeted an innocent child. For the township, the discovery turned fear into outrage. Parents clutched their children even closer, struggling to understand how such evil could strike in a place they had always considered safe. What once was a town defined by church gatherings and neighborhood trust was now overshadowed by the darkest of tragedies. The Harrington family, deeply rooted in faith, leaned on their community and their belief in God to endure the unimaginable. Congregations across Marple Township held vigils and memorials, their voices lifted in prayer for a child whose life had been stolen far too soon. But alongside grief, one question grew louder and more urgent. Who could do this to Gretchen Harrington? With Gretchen Harrington's body discovered, the investigation shifted from a desperate search to a determined hunt for her killer. Detectives from the Marple Township Police Department and the Delaware County authorities worked around the clock, piecing together every possible lead. One of the earliest realizations was chilling. Gretchen had last been seen walking toward Trinity Church, where Bible school was held that morning. She had been on her way there, but she never arrived. The church was connected to her father's ministry, which made the betrayal even harder to accept. Witnesses recalled that Gretchen was often cheerful and trusting. On that day, she had left home in her little plaid skirt and white shirt, carrying her Bible, excited for class. But somewhere along the way, someone intercepted her. Investigators believed she likely accepted a ride from someone she knew or trusted. Very quickly, suspicion began to turn toward individuals in the church community itself. Among those questioned was David Zandstra, a man who was both the pastor of the Trinity Church and a close family friend of the Harringtons. Zandstra was in a position of authority, someone who taught children and was well respected. He lived nearby, and parents, including Gretchen's, had trusted him deeply. Detectives interviewed him, along with other church staff and members. At the time, however, nothing definitive tied him to the crime. He denied any involvement, and without physical evidence, the case stalled. Despite being one of the last people who might have seen Gretchen, he managed to deflect suspicion. The investigation spread wider. Police looked at other possible suspects in the community, anyone who might have had access to children, anyone with a troubling history. Cars were checked, homes were searched, and tips from the public were followed. But every lead seemed to dry up. As weeks turned into months, and months into years, Gretchen's murder remained unsolved. For her grieving family, it was a nightmare with no end. They buried their little girl, but they could not bury the pain or the questions that haunted them. How could someone so trusted, so close, betray the innocence of an 8-year-old child? And would justice ever be found? The case grew cold, but the memory of Gretchen Harrington never faded in Delaware County. For nearly 5 decades, her murder loomed as an open wound, one of the most heartbreaking unsolved cases in Pennsylvania's history. While the forensic tools of the early 1960s were limited compared to today, this revelation made it clear to authorities that they were not only searching for a killer, but also a serial predator. This single fact changed the tone of the investigation entirely, amplifying both the urgency and the horror of the crime. Detectives painstakingly examined the area where the remains were found. The location, deep within the woods, far from the main road, suggested that the perpetrator knew the landscape well and had intentionally chosen a secluded site to conceal the crime. Despite their efforts, however, little physical evidence survived the 2 years of exposure to weather and nature. The case, though now officially a homicide, soon went cold. Without advanced DNA technology or eyewitnesses, investigators struggled to find a definitive suspect. Still, they quietly noted certain individuals who had access to children in the community and began piecing together a list of possible persons of interest. But for years, no solid leads emerged. After Gretchen's body was discovered in 1963, investigators continued searching tirelessly for answers. Detectives interviewed neighbors, local church leaders, teachers, and anyone who might have seen Gretchen on the morning she vanished. Suspicion lingered around certain figures in the community, but without hard evidence, no arrests were ever made. The case quickly grew cold. Forensic science at the time was limited, DNA testing did not exist, and many forms of physical evidence we rely on today simply could not be processed in the early 1960s. Police had little more than witness statements and circumstantial suspicions. Despite their efforts, every potential lead ended in disappointment. As months turned into years, the hope of justice seemed to fade. For more than 40 years, Gretchen Harrington's murder remained unsolved. Her parents passed away without ever seeing justice for their little girl. The case file sat in police archives, reopened from time to time, but no real progress was ever made. Many feared the truth would be lost forever. But history took a dramatic turn in 2023. Investigators, equipped with modern forensic tools and renewed determination, revisited the case. This time, they began re-examining old witness accounts and reviewing individuals who had once been questioned but never charged. One name quickly resurfaced: David Zandstra. Zandstra was not an unknown figure in Gretchen's life. Back in 1975, at the time of her disappearance, he had been a family friend and the pastor of a local church. In fact, Gretchen knew him well. Her parents trusted him as a religious leader and even allowed their children to attend Bible school under his guidance. Initially, in the 1970s, Zandstra had been questioned by police but denied any involvement. At that time, with no physical evidence linking him to the crime, Authorities had no grounds to charge him. He lived freely, moved away, and eventually settled in Marietta, Georgia, where he continued living an ordinary life. What finally changed the case was the courage of a woman who had once been close to the Harrington family. This woman, who had been Gretchen's childhood friend, shared her long-held suspicions with investigators. She revealed disturbing details about Zandstra's behavior, including allegations of inappropriate advances toward children that had haunted her memories for decades. Based on this information, detectives decided to re-interview Zandstra in 2023. By then, he was 83 years old, living quietly as a retired minister. But during questioning, something extraordinary happened. He confessed. According to prosecutors, Zandstra admitted that on the morning of August 15, 1975, he offered Gretchen a ride to Bible camp. Instead of taking her to the church, he drove her to a secluded, wooded area. There, he attempted to assault her. When Gretchen resisted, he panicked. In his own words, he struck her in the head and left her unconscious. Believing she might survive and reveal what happened, he ultimately took her life to silence her. This confession finally explained the unanswered mystery that had haunted Marple Township for nearly half a century. The trusted pastor, the man who had stood beside the Harrington family in their time of grief, had in fact been the very person responsible for their daughter's death. The news was both shocking and heartbreaking. For Gretchen's surviving sisters and for the entire community, the revelation was almost unbearable to process. The betrayal cut deep. The man they once trusted for spiritual guidance had hidden such a terrible crime for decades. In July 2023, David Zandstra was formally charged with the murder of Gretchen Harrington. He was arrested in Georgia and extradited to Pennsylvania to face justice. Though decades had passed, the arrest brought a long-awaited moment of accountability. For Gretchen's family, it was not a complete healing of the wound. Nothing could erase their loss, but it was the truth they had prayed for and the justice their sister deserved.